Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to part two of our Connected Construction Workflow webinar series. I'm Eli Austin, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Today's session is all about labor, payroll, and projects, specifically how Lumber automates this process with AI and integrates seamlessly with Acumatica ERP. For those new to Empower, we've been helping construction firms and other mid-market businesses modernize their ERP systems for more than 30 years. Our CEO, Joe Hassan, and the Empower team specialize in guiding companies beyond QuickBooks and outdated tools into the more modern cloud-based solutions that streamline workflows from estimating to closeout. Today, we'll focus on one of the biggest pain points in construction, payroll and labor management. Things like certified payroll, union reporting, and job cost synchronization are often managed manually, which means re-entry, compliance risk, and frustration for both the field and the office. So that's where Lumber comes in. Together with Empower and Acumatica, Lumber automates payroll, simplifies compliance, and ensures your labor data flows directly into job costing and financials in real time. We'll get started by hearing from Joe Hassan at Empower, followed by a live demo from our partners at Lumber, and we'll wrap up with a Q&A session, so please feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout today's presentation. With that, Joe.
Hi. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's part two webinar series on a connected construction workflows. The first series was based off of takeoffs that starts the job. Today, we're going to get into Lumber, which is specifically geared for construction, payroll, certified payroll, prevailing wage rates, things that are construction specific. Today's topic, we're going to talk about labor, payroll, and projects, connecting with the field with Lumber. About Empower, we've been in business for about 31 years. Put a lot of systems in, was a Timberline reseller a long time ago for you people old enough on this that remember what Timberline was. It was a construction-oriented software geared for construction companies. Approximately, 10 years or so, we got back into it with Acumatica Construction Edition, which is the software that all this stuff connects to, that we are having in this webinar series. Me, I have a CPA, long time ago expired. I know what a debit and credit is. I know what job costing is. I know what prevailing wage rates are. I know certified payrolls, AIA billings, which most of my team, which is very good because most of our customers love that. A lot of my project managers, including myself, are degreed accountants. We know what a debit and credit is. And these systems require that if you're going to really run the system to its fullest capacity. That knowledge is very helpful that we have, which is probably a big part of our growth and our success is because of that. So what does a modern construction company look like? Well, modern construction company is doing less manual, as much automated as possible, and you got to seamlessly coordinate from estimating through project execution and financials. It all has to be seamless, paperless, as close to real time as possible for your company to be efficient and productive. You should be analyzing data more than you should be keying data. And if that trend is not in your company, then you're not running a modern construction company. Key company, modern construction company, it's data-driven decision-making. That means the data has to come into these systems from a job costing standpoint at minimum, as close to real time as possible, because you should be doing predictive analysis, not after the fact analysis, and you can't fix the problem. Operational agility is elimination of as much manual processes. If you go around in your company and add up all the manual processes and cutting and pasting into spreadsheets, can you hear that, Eli?
I can. You got some construction going on.
Automation and AI is the future of the company, of the world, is that AI will do predictive analysis before you know it yourself automated AI will know that, but it needs data to do that. Your data, not anybody else's data, your data. Systems have to be integrated. Modern systems connect. Folks like lumber, they're dedicated to the construction payroll industry. That's what they're dedicated to. And that's what they know. And that's where they're putting their resources in, their innovation, and everything else that goes into those products. The same with the other products in this stack, the job planners of the world and the stacks of the world. They have their area of focus and expertise. And these systems all have to scale. If you don't want to be, you want to be a $5 million company and you want to get to 10, you want to get to 20, you want to get to 30, you have to have systems and processes in place that scale. How they all work together was in the earlier side. Stack starts the process off by doing takeoffs, digital takeoffs. That flows to Job Planner and Acumatica after we get the job. Job Planner, which is part of our next series, is the schedule, work, the field, connecting the field to the home office. Our friends here today, Peter from Lumber, they're going to go through their part of this construction stack, which is a certified payroll, union reporting, automated tracking, and other functionality that Peter is going to show. Acumatica itself is the core. It's the single version of the truth. It's the job costing. It's the WIP reporting. It's the financials. Am I making money on the job or am I not? Benefits of connected, eliminate data silos. If you go around in your company, how many spreadsheets are you maintaining and what are the hours to maintain those spreadsheets throughout your company? Take that number times a multiple of a cost of labor of some sorts, and I'll bet you'll be startled on what that number equals. A modern company has to have real-time job costing and reporting in the construction industry. It has to be as close to real-time as possible because decisions need to be made in real time. Would you drive your car without a dashboard, without gauges to tell you the health of the car? I wouldn't drive my business that way either. The improved field office collaboration, we'll get into that more with Job Planner, but somewhat with Peter, because Peter is going to show that the time that's out in the field can be entered via an app and hit the systems in real time. But you're going to improve field office collaboration. We're going to streamline end-to-end project management with Job Planner, scheduling, submittals, RFIs, all those things that make up managing a project. Typically in these customers, 70% of our new customers are coming off QuickBooks. And there's similarities that are found in everybody that's running QuickBooks, whether it's a construction company or distribution company or inventory or manufacturer, but we'll stick with construction today. You have to export job cost data manually. Your payroll, I know for a fact, QuickBooks cannot do certified payroll, union reporting, all those things that go into a construction company that does certified payroll and union reporting. The field and office are never connected. They're not on the same page. That they're not connected. You have multiple systems, and I count spreadsheets as systems because they are systems if you're cutting, pasting, and data into them, and you are trying to maintain them, and probably 15 minutes after you cut and paste it into your Excel, the data was outdated anyways. And spreadsheets aren't going to scale. Typical quick synopsis today of QuickBooks versus Acumatica Construction: true job costing, real-time cost to complete. Peter's going to allude today to the payroll certified union QuickBooks isn't doing, and Peter's going to go through that, how their program handles all that and how it integrates to Acumatica. And we could get into change order management, and field collaboration, and financial forecasting, integration, and automation. And this side will be fully available to anybody that wants these slides. We'll be happy to get them to you. Hidden costs of QuickBooks, manual entry. You can't scale manual. So if your aspirations of a construction company is 5 million today, 10 million tomorrow, 20 million and 30 million, that's what you want to grow to. Manual entry and spreadsheets and all the manual entry you're doing won't scale, and you'll have to hire people if you can find those people. Centralized visibility into the job performance. In real time, I can be on my phone and see whether I'm ahead or behind on any job I want to look at. Compliance is a huge issue in the construction world that your typical QuickBooks isn't going to do, and you're doing it somewhere, maintaining it offline by someone or people or a whole group to do that. Inefficient billing. For instance, QuickBooks is not going to do AIA progressive billings. It's not going to track change orders that need to be billed in real time. It's not going to do any of that natively itself or connected to anything for that matter.
All righty, Joe.
I appreciate that time. And Peter, I appreciate you. And it's all you, my friend.
Thank you very much, Joe. Eli, thank you guys for having me. Really excited to present alongside Empower today. We're partnered to deliver our solutions to Acumatica clients, and we'll be focusing mostly on the time tracking and payroll side today. As Joe alluded to, lumber is really strong at supporting union and prevailing wage, some of the more complex scenarios that a lot of construction companies typically deal with. I have a couple things I'll pull up briefly before we get into a product. Eli, is that okay if I go ahead and share my screen?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Go for it.
Excellent. So let me go ahead and I'll just go ahead and share. I won't go through in depth on these slides, but just to quickly go through and talk a little bit more. For those that are not aware of what Lumber is, we are an all-in-one construction workforce management platform designed, again, specifically for the construction industry. We started initially with payroll and time tracking. Those are still sort of our bread and butter modules. But since then, we've added quite a few other additional modules and features into our platform. We will talk about this in the demonstration, but safety and compliance is buried throughout the platform, and really being able to automate some of those compliance challenges. We have a number of new features we've released over the last year. We have a full suite on the HR side of things, both an applicant tracking system, an onboarding module, a full benefits administration module, and lots of other cooler small modules that we've added in since then. The ability to track equipment runtime, quantities of materials on a specific project or task or cost code. But again, we'll focus mostly on the time tracking and payroll sides for today. And just to talk a little bit about the relationship we have with Acumatica, we have a rather unique relationship. John Case is one of our early investors, and because of that, it is one of our highest priority integrations and one of the first integrations we ever built. We meet with their team very regularly, and the integration that we have, and I'll just briefly pull up a quick integration guide here. And let me just make this screen a little bit bigger for everybody. The integration we have is very deep and very flexible. And what I've just pulled up is the integration document that describes the integration with Acumatica and Lumber. And the important thing to note with all of these high-level objects we're looking at now is, as Joe mentioned earlier in the call, seeing Acumatica as that single source of truth. So whether it's the company details, the various branches and departments you may have, or the projects themselves, not only projects, but project tasks. We use the same sort of nomenclature with projects and tasks, so it'll feel very familiar in both systems, but also estimates for those cost codes. We can pull in time entries as well. Again, we can push those time entries directly into Acumatica. And at the bottom, you see, to close that loop, the payroll journal that we push into Acumatica automatically once again, and with a very detailed level of data that you can expect pushing back into Acumatica. So I'd like to cover that just to sort of set the stage. What I'll start with is the mobile app here. And let me go ahead and share that screen for you guys. And with the mobile app, one thing I like to preface with is there's really flexibility is the name of the game. So there's lots of different options when it comes to tracking your time. What I'll walk you through initially is more or less of a live individual clock in and out. However, we also have the concept of a retroactive time card. So employees could log time at the end of the day, end of the week even. We have the concept of a foreman mode, and I'll maybe briefly go through that as well, so that either foremen or supervisors can add time on behalf of their crews or individuals in bulk very easily. We have a kiosk mode as well. This is especially popular for some of our union clients where you may not be allowed, or it's wary on their CBA of forcing or requiring an employee to download a mobile app on their own personal device. So that kiosk mode is a great alternative. You could set it up on a tablet or computer on the job site. And just recently, we released, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the new AI enhancements underway. But with one of these AI tools, we just released a new feature where you can take pictures of paper time cards and convert them automatically into digital timesheets. So I feel like we have an option for almost everybody, and a lot of our clients do sort of a hybrid approach for time tracking. But again, we'll focus on more or less of an individual clock in and out to start. I'll go ahead and click clock in first. You'll see I have a couple options, both unscheduled and scheduled projects. We'll stick to the unscheduled projects for the moment. And this list of projects is customizable at the user level. So again, projects are pulled automatically from Acumatica and reflected in Lumber. There's really no redundant manual entry to have each system reflect properly. That being said, if you have a long list of active projects, you do not need to give that entire list to each and every single employee. So if these are the 4 projects that are applicable for me to log time to, these will be the 4 projects I can select. And you'll notice the most recent ones I've logged time against will be here at the top. So we'll go ahead and select this 150 Market Street project. We do support sub-projects as well. The next step is to select a task. And again, these are pulled straight from Acumatica. I'll just select a random task for today. Maybe we'll do concrete forming. And you'll notice some of these subsequent fields, really just the project and task, are going to be the main required fields for an employee to select. Things like trade, workers' comp classifications, cost codes can be set up and defaulted against that task. And we'll talk a little bit more on how you can set that up. Just note that generally trade, workers' comp codes, cost codes is not required to be selected by the end user, unless, of course, that is the preference of the client. So I'll just key in some random fields here for the last couple fields. And in the final step, you'll notice I have the option to select a piece of equipment. So I referenced this at the beginning. We do have an equipment management module where employees can log time against an equipment that they're operating. You can also have foremen log time in bulk for pieces of equipment for crews or individuals. So we'll go ahead and I'll clock into the Caterpillar to take a look at what that looks like here. Now that I'm on the clock, you'll notice I do get a geofence boundary alert. We do have geofencing that you can enable, and you can configure a geofence around each job site and a radius around that job site. As you noticed, it's not going to prevent me from clocking in or out. It will flag any geofence violations for admins when they're reviewing time cards. We set it up that way just as a default. A lot of our clients have projects in very close proximity to one another. Maybe you're well underground, hundreds of feet. So we have that way as a default. Of course, you could take that to the next level. And if you want to have this geofence be a preventative measure for employees clocking in and out, you can certainly enable that as well. Now that we're on the clock, you'll notice the app is color coded. So it's this nice lumber green color when I'm clocked in. If I take a break for either a meal or a rest break, the app will change to this orange yellow color. You can also just build in regular default break times to their time cards as well, so you're not required to track breaks this way. We'll hit the pause button to go back on the clock here. There's a couple things I can do while I'm punched in. You'll see I have a section for notes here. Anything that I add to these notes are going to be tied back for the admin to review when they're reviewing time cards. I can also add pictures as part of those notes as well. If I need to switch projects or maybe even just switch tasks on the same project midday, I don't necessarily need to clock all the way back out to clock back into something else. I can use this shuffle button here in the bottom right. And you'll see when I'm attempting to switch projects, it will ask me to confirm. In this case, I logged some time against a piece of equipment. So it's asking me how long I was operating that piece of equipment for. In this case, I was only clocked in for a few moments. It's going to key in that time for that shift automatically. But of course, if I was only operating that piece of equipment for half of my shift, I can key that amount in differently. And then I can go ahead and clock into another project. And again, I'll just go through that flow one more time very briefly. just so we can clock into something else. And this time I'll skip over the equipment. You'll notice in the bottom part of the screen, you'll see the shift details called out. So you can always at a glance very easily see what project, cost code, trade, workers' comp code I'm currently clocked in under. And one thing to note is you do have the ability to ask both custom clock in or custom clock out questions. And so we'll take a look. We have some standard off-the-shelf clock out questions we'll typically ask. When I go ahead and clock out for the day, you'll see some of these questions pop up. The standard questions we typically ask, one, is your time correct? The most common example is maybe I went about my day, I logged time to my shifts, and then I just forgot to log myself back out at the end of the day. Maybe you realized when you got home that evening, you were just racking up overtime. And in that event where something was incorrect on my time card, I can respond no and request what's called a time correction request. Nothing's finalized until an admin gets the chance to review and approve. However, lots of flexibility here. Want to give as much power into that end user so that they can edit or adjust whatever they need to. The next couple questions we'll typically ask, but again, these can be completely customized, is were you injured? If there was an injury, we can track those incidents. They can document exactly what happened. They can upload a picture of that injury as well. And we can also track commutes and per diems. You could even set up a specific rate for being a driver or a passenger, whether it's around the miles spent traveling or the time spent traveling. Very similarly, we'll set up per diem rates and subsistence rates for when per diems are applicable and if they were provided any overnight lodging. Ultimately, I'll sign off digitally on my time card and clock out for the day. You'll notice I get a little scorecard for the day. We call this gamification. And full transparency, we built this initially entirely for fun, but a lot of our clients have really enjoyed utilizing this. And I think it's especially exciting for the younger generation of workers coming in, where you can have a fun way of incentivizing the usage of an app, being able to earn streaks in a sense for certain metrics. So for the examples you see on screen, things like safety, taking your breaks on time. You'll notice I did not get one for proximity as I did violate the geofence today. But for example, if I was maybe safe on the job for, let's say, a week straight, I could earn a safety badge for that. Those badges can be tied to that user's account. You can track those badges over time. And if you wanted to add some sort of reward or incentive as part of that badge, completely your choice. But again, completely optional. Couple other things to point out. Past the time entry piece, this doubles as an employee's self-service portal in many ways. So you'll notice we have a tab for pay up in the top middle here. Employees can see a countdown to their next paycheck. They can review historical pay stubs from here as well. If I click on one of those pay stubs, I can download the PDFs if I ever need to take out a loan, for instance. This is also where employees can request things like time off. If I open up the hamburger menu up here in the top right, you'll see we have a time off section right here. In my case, I have a limited balance, but we have a very flexible way of creating policies. Really, you could theoretically have each employee with their own unique PTO policy if you wanted to. But again, in my case, we have a limited balance. And if I go ahead and make a request for paid vacation, it'll show me what that current available balance is and what the remaining balance would be if this did get approved. Last couple things to point out in the mobile app, employees can manage their pay. So if they want to add multiple bank accounts, they can add, I believe, up to 7 different accounts and configure a paycheck split amongst them. And employees can also manage documents. So not only some of their tax documents, we have sort of a self-service onboarding flow that the employees can complete in the mobile app where they'll enter their personal info, direct deposit information, and complete any of those tax forms as well. However, anything that they need access to on the job site, you can also have project documents accessible in-app as well. Whether it's specific to a project or something that applies to every job site, very easy to upload those documents in. Now, the last couple things to point out briefly before we hop into the admin side, the entire app is toggleable into Spanish. We do have some new languages on the way. We did just launch in Canada earlier this year, which we're very excited about. So French Canadian is up next, but this will save that setting for future logins. And the cool part with that is sort of one additional, again, optional feature here is our two-way messenger. And this is a great way to connect the fields to the back office. You can group message crews. You could group message entire projects if you wanted to. You can communicate back and forth with pictures. And the cool thing is if my app is set in Spanish and I send messages in my native language of Spanish, those messages will translate back and forth in real time. But again, several things that are completely optional in there, and so you'll hear me allude to that a couple times. Everything in Lumber is a la carte, so you can really break our platform however you see fit and pick and choose which modules and features make sense to utilize. Now, with that, we can hop into the admin side. Let me go ahead and reshare my screen one more time. Now, the first stop in the what I call the admin console is going to be this timesheets grid view that we're looking at now. What I wanted to briefly do is just show you one easy way for foremen or supervisors to add time in bulk for employees. We'll use Brandon as our guinea pig for today just because he's got a nice blank slate to work with. This is not only where time cards can be manipulated and adjusted, but also where time entries can be completely added on employees' behalves, as well as approved and reviewed. So I think of this really as a smart spreadsheet in many ways. Again, we'll just select this blank time cell for Brandon here. Very similar to how I did previously, I'll just key in some of the project details. We'll key in the project and task. You'll see from that task things like cost code and trade being populated. And again, we're still looking at just Brandon and just looking at the 13th. However, if we wanted to add multiple employees or crews to this time card, we'll just select Brandon's name. With the click of a button, if you use the concept of crews, you could very easily just add the 151 crew to this time card. Otherwise, we know crews are not always set in stone, so you can always mix and match employees as well. Just because I see Bob right next door, we'll add him to this time card. And my suggestion, I think best practice is to do more of a daily time card submission if possible. However, very easy to spread these time entries across multiple days if required. We'll just spread those from the 13th to the 17th. We'll go ahead and click save, and we'll see those hours start to populate for Brandon and Bob. Now, when it comes to reviewing time cards, I always say you can be as detailed and granular in your review or as high level as you would need to be. And we'll take a look at the time cards I just filled out previously. And actually, I'll use another time card since it looks like I've approved those. We'll go ahead and take a look at Benjamin Carter's time card for the other day. Now, in Benjamin's case, he only worked on one shift. If an employee worked across multiple shifts, you'll see those broken out as their own line item. And again, while we have a lot of guardrails and automations in place to really streamline this process, in the event where you need to override anything on a time card, for example, and we'll talk a little bit more about prevailing wage, but you'll notice job classification on this time card. We have a really easy way of defaulting job classification and job level at the user level. However, in the scenario where maybe a journeyman calls in sick, you need to override someone's pay rate for the day and have them be a journeyman for that shift. Very easy to override that directly from the time card itself. Past that, you also have a number of quick tasks that you can use. So very easy to manipulate these time cards if you need to, for example, split a task. Maybe an employee mentioned in their notes that I actually worked across 2 different projects. I only logged time to one today, and I don't want to deal with the mobile app to fix it. Very easy to just split those tasks apart, key in the details for that second shift, and then adjust either the start and end time, or you can always key in just bulk number of hours as well. And while you have this very detailed and granular view, and you can actually take this one step further, if you unfurl what I call the shift details, it will pull out some of those other details to take a look at. We have some indicators directly on the time card. So for instance, if it is a prevailing wage project, we have a little PW icon in the bottom left. In the shift details, this is where you'll see an overview. This is essentially just telling you where the time card came from. Again, several options for time cards, whether it's the individuals adding their own time or responsible for their own time, or a foreman or a kiosk mode. any notes that were documented by that employee. And again, this will include any pictures. If you choose to use a geofence, you will see that geofence data here. And actually, we'll take a look at some of my previous time cards and see if we have some data here. If we don't, that is okay. But essentially, we have a breadcrumbing trail. So we'll just pull another time card back up here. In this case, Andrew's time card, a little bit more complex. He was jumping around from project to project. But again, nonetheless, each project is going to be broken out here. And this geofence, again, if it's enabled, you'll be able to track through a breadcrumbing trail while they're clocked in. Any travel time that was documented, their employee's signature, and then finally, any injuries that were documented by the employee as well. And for things like injuries and geofence violations, those will be flagged directly on the time card. So in the event where there is a safety incident or there is a geofence violation, you'll see that reflected not only in the shift details, but also in the shift details column directly on this grid that we're looking at. And while you have that very detailed level control, you're certainly not expected to approve line item by line item. Very easy to approve in bulk. For example, I can approve Andrew Thompson's time for the week with the click of a button. I can also manage multiple users at once with the left-hand side of the screen. So if I wanted to grab everybody's time cards and approve or reject in one fell swoop, very easy to do so. One thing to note here as well is that we don't charge per transaction or per pay run as many other payroll providers do. So you could theoretically push and run as many off-cycle payrolls as you would need in a given month, not going to impact your billing in any way, shape, or form. Now that we've taken a look at time cards, and one thing I did not mention is we do have the concept of tiered access levels. So based on your role at the company, maybe you want to have some PMs with access to their projects' timesheets or the employees that worked on those projects' timesheets without being able to access any other project's timesheets or any other information, maybe the more sensitive information that comes along with payroll. So really easy to make some of those permission rules in the system. You also have a plethora of filters you can use to look at specific projects. You can look at time cards for specific cost codes or statuses. So again, lots of flexibility there. Once the time cards get approved, and you'll notice they're highlighted in blue once they're already approved. Any time cards marked in red, which I think we had one previously that I already approved here. Time cards in overtime will be marked in red. But once they get approved, they get pushed to a payroll draft automatically. So we'll go through that payroll draft briefly. The payroll process really gets streamlined quite a bit within Lumber, and it's fairly self-explanatory. But once we get through that payroll draft, we'll take a look at where we define some of those pay rates and some of the back-end settings. That really is where the magic starts to happen. You'll also notice we have this magic Lumber AI button here in the top right. So again, we've fully embracing AI. We've got a lot of AI enhancements underway. The first phase of this AI rollout with Lumber Track AI is it's essentially a layer across the platform, looking over your shoulder and identifying any potential issues, whether it's compliance issues or calculation issues, earlier on in the process. So for example, from a timesheets perspective, maybe there's someone with a pending PTO request that is just sitting there and nobody's approved it yet. Maybe somebody's logged only 30 minutes of time and typically they log around 40 hours, give or take. Those types of things will be flagged for you, and I can click on one of those flags and it will bring me directly to that potential issue. This is especially valuable when it comes to the more complex scenarios, specifically around prevailing wage and union compliance. We'll talk about this in a little bit as well, but we have the notion of you can set or proactively manage pay rates, and you could set, for example, you could have a start and end expiration date defined for pay rates and pay tables. For instance, if maybe you set a pay table to expire, but then a secondary rate was never configured ahead of time, something like that would be an excellent example where this system will warn you in advance that these rates are going to expire soon, and that you should, as an admin, take another double check and adjust anything that would be needed. So this is by no means an exhaustive list, and you can see it's taken a little bit for it to load in. This is, again, a demo instance, so we've got all kinds of bells going off today. With that, however, we can click on Go to Payroll, and it's going to bring us to that payroll draft. Initially, and I'll just go backwards a couple weeks in time just to grab a little bit more data here. But this first phase is fairly high level. And again, I'll just quickly grab some data from the other week here. This is better. You'll see in this case, we're looking at a weekly pay schedule. We do support multiple pay schedules. If maybe the field is on a weekly schedule versus office staff on a biweekly or monthly schedule, we do support those variations. You'll see the pay period start and end dates. And in this case, payday is on the 10th. So you'll need everything approved by the 8th at 5 p.m. It's generally a standard 2-day turnaround for ACH deposits. We can offer next day funding as well as an alternative. Looking at the breakdown here, you'll see all the employees on this payroll run. And if I unfurl a particular employee's pay stub, we can take a look at their earnings. Taking a look at Alex first, you can see he is a salaried individual. So it's fairly self-explanatory and fairly straightforward. You have that salaried earning type for the pay period. You have the workplace assigned for tax purposes, and then finally the gross amounts on the right-hand side. However, taking a look at someone with a slightly more complex time card or pay stub, like in Danny's case, he's an hourly worker. He's getting different rates across different projects. So again, you're going to see all of those various earnings broken out in this overview or sort of review section. Overtime, reimbursements categorized a little bit differently. One thing to mention on the reimbursements, anything like a car allowance or a cell phone allowance, you can completely automate in the system. You can set up that contribution or that reimbursement and those date ranges, and then from there it's applied automatically. However, any one-off earnings, like a one-off reimbursement, a one-off bonus, or a commission, can be added from this overview screen that we're on right now. But again, fairly high level at this stage. The next point, when we preview this payroll, we'll dive into a more detailed breakdown. And this is a good point for me to emphasize that Lumber is full service when it comes to payroll. So we handle the movement of money. We handle any payroll related taxes, not only federal and state, but also any local taxes that may be applicable. We'll handle things like child support garnishments on our client's behalf as well. You'll see in this pay breakdown, we do support both direct deposit as well as paper checks. You'll see the full standard breakdown here of any earnings and additional earnings and reimbursements. Finally, their gross and net pay, once again, on the right-hand side. On the tax breakdown, you see a very detailed breakdown of every federal, state, and local tax being incurred both by the employee and by the company. And yes, we do support multi-state, multi-rate calculations. So if that's another sort of complex use case that Lumber is really good at supporting. Post-tax deductions, this is where you'll see, again, any child support garnishments. We do support other types of garnishments as well, like levies or payday advances, for example. You'll see some of those union post-tax deductions taken out in this section as well. And then finally, anything we don't directly remit on the client's behalf, like benefits, for example, we still have very clearly broken out both the employee's side of contributions and the company side of contributions. And with 401k specifically, we have a long list of native integrations. Most of the major players in the industry, we do have a native 360 integration with. So with 401k specifically, we can connect to those carriers and send them anything we calculate from payroll for 401ks. Now from here is where I typically go into some of the settings. Once you submit payroll, your job's pretty much done, and it really turns the payroll process into really more of another approval. Of course, you can adjust any one-offs as necessary, but we do automate a significant portion of the calculations. I like to point out, however, that you can always generate a payroll register, both either as an Excel or a PDF, if you ever wanted to look at these numbers prior to officially processing them. But taking a look, and I know I've alluded to these a few times here, we'll hop into the company settings. And I think I just switched companies by accident there. Looking at the company settings, there's quite a few rules in the initial settings, and a lot of these are time tracking settings. For example, you can set up break configurations and have employees notified when they're approaching time for a break. You have a number of rules around overtime, where you can define overtime either a daily rule, a weekly rule. You can have separate rules for working on weekends or consecutive days or holidays. Again, this is sort of the standard overtime rule. This is separate from any overtime configurations in the union setup. just to quickly go through some of these, you'll have those workers' comp codes that you can upload, and we have a workers' comp report we generate. Those cost types and cost codes are going to live in these back-end settings. And then those vacation and sick leave policies are configured in these back-end settings as well. Again, I won't go through these and spend too much time, but again, a lot of flexibility with defining these policies, not only for paid vacation, but also sick leave, bereavement leave, unpaid, and any other type of paid leave that you may offer. Now, when it comes to unions and prevailing wages, we'll start with unions first. Generally, we, as part of the service we do during implementation, we ingest any CBAs that with your union, and we take on the work of configuring these rules for you. That being said, all of these settings I'm going to walk you through are available for the client to adjust, override, completely set up on their own. So really, you could be as hands-on or as hands-off as you would like to be. But taking a look, we'll use this local 134 as our example. In terms of union setup, we'll set up each union as its own distinct configuration. First, you'll get an overview of that particular local. You'll have their break rules, shifts, in this case, just a day and a night shift. The fringe benefits listed out. In this case, we just have 2 examples. Finally, you have an overtime rule for that local. Any reciprocity rules, we do support union reciprocity in the event where a union employee may be going into different jurisdictions. And then at the bottom is where that rate table is going to live. And this is where you have job level, trade, and classification. Finally, those pay rates and fringes listed out. As well, a couple things to note, we do have an equipment pay rate where they can get a differential if they're an operator. We also support things like shift differentials or shift premiums as well. And you'll also notice we have a start date and expiration date. So I alluded to this earlier on. You can manage these rates more proactively in advance. If you know that this particular union is updating the rates, let's say twice a year, you can pre-configure those rates. Really easy to duplicate the configuration, update whatever rates are going to change, and then from there, the system will pick those new rates up automatically. And the CBA is going to live right here at the bottom. Now, when it comes to prevailing wage, very similar process. Of course, this can vary depending on how the project is funded, whether it's a federally funded, state funded, maybe it's jointly funded. There's some rules specifically around fringe benefits and how they sort of react to the rest of payroll. For example, you can have bona fide fringe credits allocated to specific benefits or selected benefits. Generally, we use the higher of the 2 rates by default. However, that can be configured differently. You can have cash fringes automatically contributed to a 401k plan, for example. And when it comes to the prevailing wage, the wage determination setup, we'll take a look at Alameda as our brief example. Again, it's very similar to union setup. First, you have those various shifts. You have the list of fringe benefits as part of that prevailing wage requirement. And then again, towards the bottom is where that rate table is going to live. Same deal, you have job level, trade, and classification, as well as the shift, and then those pay rates and fringes listed out once again. And it's the same deal. You can have that expiration date defined. You can proactively manage these tables. You can also exclude specific tasks from prevailing wage. And the most common example is something like maybe a shop floor sort of scenario, or maybe drive time that's tracked and billed or charged to the job, but generally is not considered certifiable. Now that we've defined some of where these rates live, sort of how the system recognizes to pick these rates up is it all happens at the project level. And again, projects and project tasks are pulled in from Acumatica automatically. You'll have this list of all of your active projects here, and I'll just hop into 150 Market Street as a quick example. A lot of information we pull in within the project details here. However, the 2 toggles I wanted to draw your attention to initially here is this union project toggle and this prevailing wage toggle. If there are union employees or workers on this project, either from one union or multiple locals, you can add them in and you'll simply enable that toggle there. If this is a prevailing wage project, you simply flip that toggle on, select the applicable wage determination that we've already established in those back-end settings. And then from there, the system's going to recognize to pick up those rates to pay the employees. Of course, you can pay them a higher rate if you need to as well. But also B, generate the subsequent report automatically as well. So to continue on that thread of certified payroll and union reporting, we can take a look at some of the other payroll reports, starting with prevailing wage, since I know that this is everyone's favorite report to generate. We generate these automatically both either at the federal level or the state-specific level. Let me just rewind a week in time here, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of data to work with. And as this is loading in, one thing to note, you'll see that this is the 2025 or the 2024 version WHD form. We do support the new 2025 format as well. And you can see as soon as time is logged to a project marked as prevailing wage, those employees will show up within the reporting, as you see here. You can default their job classification and job level, but of course you can override that at any time as well. And while this is pre-populated with a lot of that information, as an admin, you have full control over jumping into the report and overriding any and all of these fields. Ultimately, you'll sign off digitally on this report, and you can download in any of the above formats depending on the upload tool you're required to use. And just as a quick example, let me just swap over here. I think we've got an example for California. As I mentioned, both federal and state-specific formats, we do support all 50 states and their local specific formatting. In this case, it's the California A1-131, and you can see we will still generate these reports even in periods of non-performance. On the union reporting side of things, we know every union can be a little different and unique in terms of their preferences of how they want union reporting to show up. Taking a look, and we'll go to this local 134 here. And again, almost all these reports I'm going to go through, you can customize these date ranges. So I'm just going to grab a little bit more data here. But when it comes to union reporting, we have each employee listed out, their job level and classification, their total amounts of hours, both regular, overtime, and double time, and then the earnings broken out as well. Fringe benefits listed out and their contributions. In this case, we just have the one fringe benefit. And again, we have some examples that I can show. When it comes to union reporting, we have both a PDF sort of version, but I know that some unions prefer more of a straight sort of CSV format as well. So we can work with the clients based on the union's preferences. Now, when it comes to some of the other reporting, a lot of them, these reports are fairly standard, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on each and every single one. For example, this payroll journal, I'm sure, especially if you're coming from QuickBooks or a more manual process, you'll be very familiar with a payroll journal. And I'm pulling a fairly egregiously large time frame here, so it's just taking a moment to load in. However, we have a payroll journal as well as a payroll summary that we can take a look at. And if it's taking too long to load, I'll just hop into the next one. Not a problem here. A couple other reports I wanted to call out, and there we go. Let me just adjust this to last quarter. That'll help with these next couple reports here. But again, payroll journal, payroll summary, fairly standard reports. Payroll summary, of course, it's not going to be broken out per pay period as it is in the payroll journal. And I won't go through each and every single column here. We've got quite a few being applied. But a couple other reports that I wanted to call out, we of course have a tax liabilities report where you can see every federal, state, and local tax being incurred each pay period. The job costing report is a unique one in lumber. This is a real-time job costing report, so that as soon as time is logged and approved and pushed to a draft, you're going to see that populate in these real-time labor hours, even before payroll is officially processed. Right now, I'm looking at it sort of at an aggregate level across all of my projects. However, I can drill down into a specific project. Again, I can customize the date range to whatever time frame I need to. And from here, I can see those real-time labor hours coming in. From that, we have essentially an estimate for labor costs from those hours. And we break it out one step further by cost code. As I mentioned at the beginning, we don't only pull the cost codes, but we also pull in the estimates for each cost code from Acumatica. And once we have some actuals start to populate, we'll make a comparison between the estimated labor hours and the actuals and show any variances between the two on the far right-hand side of the screen. I like to show this report simply because, again, all of this job costing data ultimately will land in Acumatica, and Acumatica should be the source for the majority of your reporting. However, being able to access these insights in real time is very valuable. And also, this is a good way of visualizing the detail of what you can expect pushing back into Acumatica through that general ledger entry, where it's not only broken out with project level data, but you're also getting employee level data broken out by cost code in a very detailed way. Now, the last ones to call out, again, I've mentioned a couple of those other reports. We do have a workers' comp report as well. For those that are dealing with prevailing wage frequently, we also have an apprentice ratio report. So really critical with staying in compliance, being able to see those ratios between apprentice hours and non-apprentice hours. So with that, there's certainly more to talk about. I'm sure I could talk about payroll for hours, but with that, I'll toss it back to Eli. I don't know if we've had any questions come up, but happy to address those as they come in.
So I wanted to, Peter, first, thank you. There's quite a bit, as you can tell, that is part of Lumber, and we're super excited to be partnered with you. And the expertise that y'all bring to the table is something that we also very much value. But we did get a couple questions. The first one you kind of covered. So I just want to see if you have anything to add to it. It was an early on question about handling certified payroll across multiple unions and jurisdictions. You did touch on that. Is there anything that you would want to add to that, Peter?
No, I think I touched on it, but one thing I want to talk about a little more is when it comes to union reciprocity. It's a really can be a really complex situation, and Lumber is really good at being able to support some of those complex situations where you have fine-tuned controls over which fringes are being used. Is it the home union's fringes? Is it the other jurisdictions' fringes? Are we using the home union's pay rates or the other union's pay rates? We have the concept of zones. So especially in California, I know that they're sort of notorious for this, but just depending on where you're doing the work in, maybe I'm down in the Bay Area today, that's going to impact my pay rate. I'm going to get paid a higher rate. So there's a lot of moving parts, but ultimately Lumber is able to support and accommodate. So nothing really past that I wanted to add in other than just those situations are not fun to deal with. So we get it.
Love it. Love it. Love it. This one is kind of a combination, I think, Joe, for you and for Peter, and looking at if folks are coming off of QuickBooks, what can they expect with this transition to Acumatica and Lumber? What does that look like?
I could start with that one if you want, Joe. From a payroll perspective, obviously there's a lot of moving parts, as I mentioned. When it comes to implementing, essentially what we do as part of our implementations is we pick up right where you leave off. So when it comes to starting off and having a go live, it really makes no difference. Obviously, it can be nice to have a clean quarterly break or a clean year break, which is, again, usually our preference too, but we can go live really at any time. And in terms of expectations, I think it's really a good opportunity for us to evaluate current processes. There's obviously some things that are efficient that you want to preserve and continue to do, and we're not here to rip and tear any current processes that work. Our philosophy is to have our platform mold to your processes and not the other way around. But that being said, it's a good opportunity when you're doing that evaluation and that transition to look at your processes and really figure out, is this the most efficient? Is this the most precise way to be doing things? Can we be doing this differently when we have a tool like Lumber and Acumatica that really give us the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, with a lot of different options as far as automations and tools. So I think that's the one thing I would mention there. Obviously, there's some learning hurdles too. So just being in an open mind and coming ready to adjust and learn what those systems look like. Again, we're going to hold your hand through that entire journey. We understand it's a big transition. So just know that you're not alone when you're going through that transition.
And I know that's a big piece too, is us partnering with you, is that support piece. So Joe, why don't you just talk a little bit about that, a transition away from QuickBooks into Acumatica's Construction Edition? What's the expectation? What is someone?
Well, I think some of the points Peter alluded to, if you're going to talk complexity, doing something in mid-year versus waiting till January 1 when everything resets. So if it's a mid-year thing, quarterly thing, as Peter alluded to, there's going to be more complexity to it because you got to bring across data.
Sure.
The other parts of that are, to his point too, how you currently conduct business. What processes are we going to change? Like, it's a given. Are they going to, your employees going to accept putting their time in on an app, or do we got to go the old paper time card route? but that's a conversation and design process. So it also comes down to how many employees do you have, how many active people you have. Does that data exist? It would have to exist somewhere, right? Or how are they paying people? So I'd say it depends on the situation, but I think the biggest thing I keep harping on, mid-year versus beginning of year.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one sort of piece that came from this too, Joe, I think, and this is a loaded question, so I don't expect a direct answer, but someone had asked, what's like the time expectation? So if someone wants to take this next step and they say, okay, we're going to plan for this at the start of the new year, what is the expectation from implementation to go live?
Well, again, depending on the size of the company.
Lots of variables.
Right. There's lots of variables, but some Acumatica Construction Edition doesn't have to be completely stood up. Peter needs jobs in order to punch time against jobs. So we have one right now that's going to go live in January. But the Acumatica won't be completely stood up in the sense that all their business processes will be fully functional inside Acumatica. But for the payroll to happen in January, we need projects and cost codes in order to process the payroll and the checks.
Well, I think that you sort of spoke to a really great thing there, Joe, is that's part of what Empower brings, is this ongoing piece of understanding your business and how is the system working for you. I think that, Peter, you even alluded to that, is we want to build a system that works for you and with you. So there's sort of eliminating these bottlenecks and constraints. But appreciate you both. That sort of addresses all of the questions. I just wanted to thank everyone who joined us today for part 2 of the Connected Construction Workflow series. Hopefully now you can see how automating labor and payroll through lumber combined with Acumatica and Empower's implementation expertise can absolutely help you eliminate the manual processes, reduce that compliance risk, and keep job casts accurate in real time. Our next webinar will be next Wednesday, September 24th, where we'll dive into scheduling, field updates, and financials with Job Planner and the Acumatica Construction Edition. We'd love to have you join us for that session as well. In the meantime, if you're interested and want to talk more about how Empower can help modernize your construction workflows or what next steps may be with lumber, please don't hesitate to reach out. We could schedule a future editor technology review. We can do introductions to the lumber team. But again, thank you for your time today. And Peter, Joe, appreciate you both. Everybody have a blessed afternoon and enjoy the rest of your week.
All right. Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Peter.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Peter.